Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Inforunners Podcast. And we are keeping with our live format, and just to let you guys know, we are toying with actually doing this live on Twitch soon.
Yeah, I think by the next time we do this, we'll be registering up a new Twitch channel. We've had a few people who have already been asking for that, so something to look forward to.
Well, today we are going to be talking about a very delicate subject, so of course I'm going to go get a hammer and we're going to go smash on some glass because we're going to be talking about ship design and everything CIG actually has done wrong with ship design that they continue to do.
No, the main problem is they keep making mistakes, but the worst part is then they repeat those same mistakes over and over and sort of don't learn from them. So like when it comes to sort of like game design and ship design, they sort of got the cart before the horse and many times.
Well, of course they have the cart before the horse because it's, ooh, this looks pretty, not, all right, I am designing a military vessel here. So what weapons do we want on this interceptor? All right, so it's an interceptor, so it's going to be fast, so we want something that's going to probably hit hard. So we're probably going with projectile weapons. So what size weapons do we want here? Do we want gimbaled or fixed?
No,
okay.
Wait a sec. That's not how they do it. They said, we want an interceptor. Let's say we're going to call it the M50. And the first thing we're going to decide is what color it is. Oh, it's going to be red. Yeah, you're right. It's going to be red. This is going to be great. That's how they do it. They think about how it's going to look first. And then they design what the hell it's going to do. It's like a rough idea of the role it fits. And then they sort of say, I like this one. This one looks good. And Chris Roberts go, we're going to do this one.
That's the Banner Defender.
That's the Banner Defender. It's like, that's how they do it. As opposed to the other way that literally all ships and probably planes and cars these days, they say we need a ship or a car or a plane for this role. So let's say if it was a military plane, they say we need a weapon system and it needs to do this. And they say, okay, therefore it's going to have this weapons. It's going to be able to do this first. And then they build the rest of the ship around that central concept, that working concept, as opposed to CIG, who have literally been quoted in ATV as saying, well, we designed the ship out all first and finished it off, and then the very last thing we do is we find a place to put the weapons.
And that is why you get things like the Hornets, because if you look at the Hornet, holy mackerel, the weapons are on the wings. Or, oh, let's take the 300 series. Oh, wait, the weapons are on the wings. And, oh, wait again. Let's just take a look at something like the Hornet Wildfire. Oh, do we even talk about the Hornet Wildfire here?
No, that's not even design. That was marketing. Well, let's not touch the Wildfire. Let's have mercy. But
mercy, but it talks about the fact that fixed versus gimbal, that they're mixing weapon types here.
Well, it's not even that. It's sort of like when you look at the Hornet, you look at the 300i, you look at many, if not most ships, because they decide to put the weapons on last. They think wings are excellent places to put guns, and they put them out the most outer reaches. And so what they get is this horrible weapon convergence. If you look at literally every military craft out today, they stick the weapons as close to the inner fuselage as they can so that they get good weapons convergence when firing forward.
The Vanguard is a great example of this. If you look at its nose.
No, the Vanguard's excellent. It's probably one of the best of its class. Honorable mentions come to the Sabre, and most recently the Banner Defender, believe it or not.
Oh, drats, I forgot to have that image. All right. Either way, these ships are great because not only do they have the weapons in good convergent spots, they're also of the right sort and type that the projectile speeds work perfectly. Keep in mind there is a little bit of an issue with the Vanguard's main weapon if you actually take a look at it, because that larger weapon does have a slightly different tracking there. But that all being said, that is not nearly as bad as looking things like, as I said, the Hornet. Because if you look at that, if you do The different mounts on the stock Hornet, or even look at the F7A. You have weapons with so many different convergence speeds and the placement and everything. You try tracking with that.
Well, it comes down to the weapon sizes. I mean, you look at the Hornet, if you want a fixed loadout, you've got to have 3 different sizes of weapons, which is a nightmare. And the Vanguard's not too bad because it's got like 6 size 2 guns if you include the turret. And so just because it's got a large size 5 on there, which you could also choose as a size 4, it's not that hard to get convergence compared to many other ships. And the same thing with the Saber and Banner Defender is they all have the same sized weapons. Unfortunately, this is sort of the exception as opposed to the rule because CIG love mixing different size weapons on literally all their ships, which make convergence, picking your weapons accordingly, a nightmare. And
Buccaneer, cough, 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 cough.
Oh god, look, when they had the idea of the twin link mount on that Buccaneer, where you could have like 4 size 3, I thought it was a decent ship. But, you know, when they announced, we don't want to have a twin size 3 on the turret anymore because we think it may be imbalanced, I melted that ship on the spot. That was the saving grace for the Buccaneer, and they ruined it. And they didn't even understand what that meant with regards to actual sort of gameplay. It wasn't that you were picking a size up and it would be too overpowered for, firepower wise. The whole reason why you wanted those twin size 3 on that turret mount was for weapon convergence. And they screwed that up.
They did. And that's a lot of their design problems. But then you have the issue, if you look at a lot of the different stock ships, they have this horrible idea of mixing gimbaled and fixed. It's ridiculous. You can run into it. Gladiator.
Comment anyone? Close range weapon
comment
with a long range weapon? I mean, is there any ship that you don't want all your weapons on target at the same time for the strongest alpha strike you can get? This idea of like mixing 2 completely different weapons for 2 different sorts of situations. I mean, what type of ace pilot does that? And yet they promote these ideas in their stock loadouts or even as their ace pilot series. They're often fairyland with regards to this sort of stuff. It's embarrassing.
Wildfire. All right. That's off the screen again.
Do not mention that again.
Wildfire. Okay, so going on to my topic is they're mixing gimbaled and fixed. So that way you have to fix your gimbal mounts or get rid of them. Or in some cases, like the Avenger or the Gladius, they're physically on there and you can't even remove them. So they're stuck. I mean, how are you supposed to shoot? I mean, you're either mouse or your joystick. I mean, you can't be both at the same time.
But at least with the Gladius, they don't give you... You can lock the gimbals for that and use fixed weapons on the wings and not get a penalty. I mean, as opposed to when you use the Valiant, Gladius Valiant, it only has a size 2 fixed weapon, which is like... Why would you even buy that ship over the regular Gladius with the actual chain gun? It doesn't make sense. Anyway, moving on. Let's move on to the next one.
All right.
We're going to do the next thing with regards to gunnery. Turrets. What do you think?
Turrets have so many interesting ideas, and there's so many missed opportunities here because first of all, they want us to have that Star Wars feel. I'm getting into Millennium Falcon, I'm getting in those turrets, and I'm shooting down TIE fighters, but they're missing so many opportunities with ideas like remote turrets, or even with ships like the Freelancer, which is and even the Starfarer in some cases, because if you look at this huge turret, which I have on the picture up here, that turret is limited in its arc. It's like it has blinders on its face trying to shoot, and it's just a gimbaled forward weapon instead of actually having the potential for it actually being a full 360 turret with someone manning it remotely.
Well, I think it's only 15 degree if you're using the pilot to control the gimbals, which is extremely limited. These guns in themselves need remote turreting. They need someone in the co-pilot or one of the other seats to take control of these guns and have the view to be able to fire with them. Mind you, they've recently gone and put in a new tech, which is extremely important to get this done. It's called render to texture, which is something Armor has, which allows you to do like rear view mirrors. It allows you to do actual remote cameras and integrate that into the game. And this will be the missing technology, that missing link they need to do remote turrets correctly.
Well, and it's not just remote turrets. If you look at the turrets, and it's not just the placement, but also the size gun on some of the turrets. Like the Freelancer is, again, a great example of it. You have a ship with like size 1 weapons on the back, or even if it had size 2. I mean, that's just going to be pinging off of whatever ship you're trying to hit. And sometimes these turrets are placed in the oddest place. Or if you just want to go look at something like the Cutlass turret, how am I supposed to see with this thing? Because it's just like there's no windows.
Well, honestly, I think they're going to pull a Cutlass on the Freelancer. It'd make a lot of sense because no one's going to get in that turret. It's kind of like, forget me, I'd rather be in a snub type. It's that bad. But if they upgrade those to 2 size 3, which I think they're going to do a lot of ships as they realize that, if they make turrets worthwhile playing, people might actually bother to step into them. But then you come down to the whole idea of, why do you want manned turrets? Like, I mean, okay, Star Wars does it, but is that a good reason to do it? Is just because the Star Wars as a space opera is his dream, you want manned turrets? It's remote turrets make so much more sense than manned turrets, and they're easier to implement. I mean, instead of doing this huge infrastructure to fit a man into a turret, you can put a camera on there and link it back to one of those stations. And suddenly you're stuck with these downfalls like, what if the turret gets killed? That guy dies.
Well, it's not even just what the guy dies, it's also the viewpoint. Like, again, going back to, like, the Cutlass turret, you can have better viewpoints on the turret with a camera. Just take a look at the beautiful view that you get with the Super Hornet. The Super Hornet has an amazing view when you actually get in there, and it has so much functionality.
Well, this is it. If you've got a camera on top of the turret that's looking at the point of view, you don't have any cockpit getting in the way. Like, at the moment, there's not a single turret that does not have a horrible view. You put a remote turret in, and suddenly the view on that is unparalleled to anything that you have. Yep. And it gives you... It just makes for better gameplay. Not to mention the fact that someone in a remote turret can quickly switch from underside to the upper side, or from the left to the right turret, and depending on what's actually in the targeting view. So they can switch between and monitor and switch between multiple turrets. In fact, you might even be able to argue for linked turrets, like pretty much real life, like with one turret operator being able to remotely gun both turrets on the Freelancer, or let's say the Starfarer. That makes a hell of a lot of sense, and it also makes them incredibly useful.
There's lots of ways of doing it too, because you can also have like kind of like a micro camera turret. Like, take the Retaliator, for example. Imagine you have all those turrets, and you have technically a couple turret gunners who have several turrets linked to it, and they just aim, and they're actually controlling multiple turrets like gimbals across the top of the vessel.
Well, that makes multiple turrets useful, because then they all sort of converge on a single target. You might want 3 different turret operators in a Retaliator to get all the coverage that you actually want. But ultimately, because you might have 2 or 3 turrets in view of the target at any one time, it sort of makes a lot of sense. It makes it... That would be better than even having separate people and separate turrets. At the same time, it doesn't diminish that gameplay. I mean, they're making manned turrets with the argument that they want to create additional gameplay for your friends to come along and play with you. And frankly, turret gameplay is boring as hell.
Yes.
I don't want to put someone in a turret because it's the boring job where they're, are we there yet? There's nothing happening in the odd battle, and they may not even be able to see and get a firing solution for the majority of that battle. But if you suddenly put a remote turret operator, he can switch to the relevant turrets, and when there's no turreting going on, he can act as a systems engineer, he can act as a navigator, he can act as anything else that comes from a console-based control system. And this makes a dedicated gunnery role in an incredibly sort of a emergent gameplay, sort of a role that people would take very seriously.
Plus being more exciting in combat, because you're not just sitting there waiting. If you've ever been in a Retaliator and actually done simulations in a Retaliator, if you get on that one bottom turret, sometimes you're just sitting there while the entire fight's going on above.
And this will really come to its own when we start to get to larger capital ships that are absolutely filled with turrets. I mean, I would never get real people to play turrets in my big ships. I'd stick them on a more important role, like another ship altogether, like an escort fighter. But if we had dedicated gunnery roles, I might consider not using an NPC and actually having them take control over an entire battery of turrets. And suddenly, instead of preferring an NPC to a very sort of dedicated and boring role, I might start actually wanting real people to man entire batteries on those capital ships. Because at the end of the day, the comparison of having one person in a turret and just sort of sitting there is not very valuable, as opposed to having that person in a dedicated escort fighter who has sort of a mind of their own. You can't compare the value of the two, and man turret gameplay is not valuable enough to justify it as it is now.
So that's one of the other big design issues that they have. But now there's a lot of other design issues that they have, and that goes down to some of your larger ships like the Retaliator or the Starfarer, where they need to work on, before they get to some of these larger ships, layout. If you ever get in a Retaliator, you get lost. If you ever get in a Starfarer, unless you're staying on that one main concourse, you're going to get lost somewhere and try to find your way out or around the ship.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure the Retaliator is going to get completely redone. It's a mess. The turrets, hopefully they reduce that, so instead of having like 5 useless turrets, they might reduce it down to 3, and maybe an unmanned turret for the pilot at the front. That would make a lot more sense. But just the internal layout, I expect that to change. Unfortunately, the Starfarer is in its sort of final. It's done. It's so complete now. They're not going to do another pass at it. It's going to be stuck the way it is. And let's face it, 2/3 of the ship is wasted passageway. That's even duplicated on like left and right sides. It's 2/3 of that space in that Starfarer, which you could probably use for systems and cargo, it's just been lost.
And that's a big issue with the ship. If you get on a Starfarer, you're going to completely and totally get lost. And that is something you can't have, especially if you're looking at something like a Retaliator, a military vessel, where you're going to have to be able to find your way places quickly. Oh, we need you at the turret. Oh, we need you to go repair this. Oh, we need you to go to check out this missile which didn't launch. I mean, you're going to be running around there on this military vessel trying to do stuff, and you can't find things. Or on a Starfarer, someone goes in there, a boarding party, and you end up lost as they are.
And then you got the cockpit views for both the Starfarer and let's put the Freelancer in there, because I'm pretty sure when they had this competition for the Freelancer, and it was about the cockpit views, which you got to vote on.
The old cockpit view is terrible.
This is going back a ways. And they did it between having like multiple struts, I think only a couple of struts, and then a clear view. And it's like, but it's still like a little bar of visibility. It was like choosing between bad, badder, and worst. And it's like they don't quite get the idea that cockpit visibility. What about the Freelancer? It's an Explorer, but you can't see anything. It's like, and this all comes down to the idea that, you know, they're not really thinking about cockpit views. I mean, look at the Defender that just came out. It shows they really haven't learned their lesson. They're still repeating these same mistakes. They say, well, it looks cool. Cockpit views?
Yep.
What? No. Chris Roberts later, I want that one. Cockpit, don't mention the C word. We're going to go with that. And unfortunately, this was replicated because the idea that MISC has this look, the Freelancer cockpit got perfectly replicated into the Starfarer.
If you put the images side to side, you almost can't even tell the difference. But the thing is, just go back to the old Freelancer cockpit for a second. They love struts. They love these struts and blinders in their designs. The struts, you will see them in all sorts of ships. You'll see them on the Connie, not to a bad degree. You'll see them on the Aurora. You'll then go in, and you can even see some stuff blocking the Xeon Scout. There's an amazing video that one of our subscribers actually linked into the last set of comments, and that was actually to a video purely about cockpit view, and it really showed the fact that CIG just loves their struts.
That was Radiant Flux, wasn't it?
Yes, Radiant Flux. I was just sitting there trying to look it up. I'm going to link the video below because it is definitely worth a check out because it points out a lot of the overall issues. And it goes back to what we said before. Why aren't you using virtual cockpits in ships? You don't lose any view. You have best view you can. And you know what? It's armored.
I also suppose another view is the idea of how they design cargo bays. I mean, if you want to look at the Freelancer, which we keep bringing up, unfortunately, but it's sort of the poster child for design done wrong. You've got these cargo bays, and they've designed walkways to go through these cargo bays, but yet they also have a side door out the back. Sort of like you have on a truck, you've got a side door and the rear door. But do we design trucks with walkways going through the back where we put the cargo?
Well, and it's even worse than the cargo bays doing that, because why in the world are you walking through there? There's this secondary mini cargo hold thing that's eating up a bunch of space with a wall. I mean, look at this cutout version, and then just look at this picture of the cargo hold. I mean, that's useless space there where you can have a larger object, a large object. And how are you getting large boxes out through that tiny little door?
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. The boxes are bigger than the door. That doesn't make any sense. But even like the rear cargo bay, if you see they've got the cargo lined up in the center and two walkways on left and right. Why do you need to walk on the left and the right? And you've sacrificed 2/3 of your rear cargo storage area in the back to a walkway? I mean, theoretically, it's almost like you could fit 3 times as much cargo in that rear section if you didn't bother putting a walkway. And you shouldn't need it in the first place.
Well, the thing is, you could.
The side door.
You could, because there's a side door on the stupid ship. I mean, this ship has a side door, and what is the point of having a side door if you're going through and having this huge walkway? I mean, I don't see the point in having that.
No, and I'm pretty sure they're going to replicate this sort of idea or mistake, whatever you want to call it, when they redo the Cutlass. And, you know, there's various other ships that suffer from this same idea. And some of the smaller ships, the idea that they have 2 walkways.
Starfarer again.
Center. Yeah, it's sort of like, why not just make the entire floor a mag plate and let people decide how they do their cargo as they see fit?
Well, that's going back to the same issue with the way they design things, because the huge issue is they're forcing you into certain paths. Because think about it, there's some ships like the Caterpillar. You can fit a snub fighter in there. The issue of fitting a snub fighter, though, is it's not going to stay put because it's not designed to stay put there. And that's a fundamental flaw. Why can't I stick a snub fighter in a Caterpillar if I want to? Why?
Well, it'll be interesting to see when they do get that system in place. Especially come 3.0, we're going to be putting a lot of vehicles and ships that probably weren't entirely meant to. Dragonfly, yeah. Rovers, like I'll be interested to see if the rover fits in the Starfarer. You know, stuff like this. It'll be interesting to see if it needs a mag locking plate at all, or in order to stop it from being like loose cargo and sort of, you know, rattling around on the inside.
But that's, again, that goes back to the same issue, is if we can fit something in somewhere, that should be our prerogative to be able to do that. And you know what? If it's not the best way of doing it, because you know what? We don't have a walkway there and we have to always use that door. You know what? That's our choice.
Then we get like sort of with ground pads and landing bays. this is one thing that sort of really shits me off. Like, I mean, I fully understand the idea of artificial gravity. You have it in a ship. It stops you from having your muscles degrade in space. You know, that's great. It fits into the law. But then you go and stick and waste a gravity pad as a landing pad? Why are you having this gravity pad on 24/7 and making it do these huge areas and then landing a ship and then getting out? I mean, like, surely there is a better way to do docking than this. And this comes down to a great number of ideas that, for some reason, they do not want to do docking. I understand that sometimes connecting two physics grids between a ship and another thing can be problematic, but you'd think you would want to dock on a space station or even a moon or an asteroid and be able to put out your landing gear and have some sort of docking mechanism that would do the reverse. It would lock on to, whether it would be metallic or it would dig in. That this would be far more useful than this landing pad mechanic that they're sort of dealing with at the moment.
Well, the thing is, they probably don't want it being like a great game called Hellion, in which you can call it Docking Simulator 50,000 as you're trying to spend years to learn how to be a professional docker because of orbit, physics, and trying not to blow your ship up. They don't want it to become that, but there needs to be some sort of feature where you can do that, because it also provides this artificial gravity all sorts of other weird problems with, well, how high does it extend? And from there, how much power is that going to take? Especially if you're looking at some of these larger vessels. I mean, how big is their gravity plating going to go? And if you look at something like the Cutlass, which is actually kind of annoying, you know that if you see that docking circle at the bottom and you jump through it, you're not going to be able to get back in. So what's the point of actually having that? Unless you have another gravity section.
I mean, they are starting to remove all the docking things, like from the Cutlass and other things. But I would argue that they need a secondary sort of docking system to be able to dock in places that don't have dedicated pads. Like, you know, what happens if the power's out? You can't dock. It's like, ideally the ship should be able to extend its landing gear and latch onto something, just so you can park. It doesn't.
Or what about two ships in space that want to just trade? You have to EVA over?
Yeah, this is it. Like, moving cargo between two ships, whether it be from a hull or a merchantman to some other ship to resupply, they need dedicated docking mechanisms to transfer cargo from one to the other. These are things I think they need to explore and sort of, you know, work out. Things like, I really think ships would benefit from having things like grav boots to be able to navigate outside and repair external stuff, especially for larger ships. At the same time, I think you should be able to tie cargo down. And if you don't have a grav plate somewhere and you want to put cargo in a room that's not made for it, you should be able to strap the cargo to the ground and use sort of like grav sort of locks to lock it down so that loose cargo doesn't bounce around. This would be exceptionally good for putting snubs into something like, I don't know, a Starfarer or some other sort of larger ship in areas that it doesn't support. I think they need to expand past the idea of grav plates and grav locking plates, both internally and externally to ships, because the gameplay they have at the moment, maybe not right at the moment because we don't really have cargo and we don't have most of our larger ships, but going into the future, you're going to find a lot of people who want to dock in areas and locations that are outside of the normal grav pad zones. And
well,
I think
search and
it
rescue
would be useful. Search and rescue, perhaps, yeah.
That's one of the allures to me of the idea of search and rescue, is the ability to, all of a sudden you see an abandoned ship in space, you dock to it, kind of like that Star Trek, and you just go pop through and you start going in there. It's just that allure of, I'm not flying in and trying to find an entrance. I'm docking to that docking point and looking through. It just has that kind of allure and surprise. So, lots of different things.
I think that's it. I think we're finished for today.
I think we're finished for today. Guys, Hope you enjoyed it. I know we are literally, as I said before, taking a hammer to a glass subject, but what do you think? Are we wrong? Right? Right on some things? Wrong on some things? Like the new format? Want to see us on Twitch? Let us know.
I think the more important part is that CIG doesn't recognize these problems and then ends up repeating them. Like, look at the Defender, case in point. And I think they need someone who is focused on design in the conceptual and sort of the moving forward phase to go and say, does this even make sense?
Well, it goes
from a user standpoint, because at the moment, what happens is this looks good, we're going to go with this. And they don't really go along this, is this what we need? Or is this going to work well? These questions aren't asked. And they need someone to ask those questions.
Well, the thing is, the questions aren't asked, and then they go into damage control mode, like, oh yeah, like back into the Banu Defender Q&A. Well, we're thinking about fixing the visibility by dropping down the spokes. I'm like, okay, or widening the spokes, or something with the spokes, and you're like, okay, if they do that, now they may actually mess with the one thing that's great on the Banu Defender as well. It was just a turret convergence.
Well, I think even if they dropped it down and raised the cockpit, they're still going to be blocking most of the view on the lower part. It's still a problem. It's gone from like worse to just bad. It's still not that great because they can't really fix it unless they radically redesign the concept. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we would love some feedback. Anything you thought here, put it down below. We respond and actually read all our comments, and so we'll try to talk back and tell us what we think and what you think, and back and forth.
Well, as always, see you around in the verse.
Catch you around.